بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم إني وجدت تعلم تعليم تذكر وتذكير نفع والانتفاع إفعال الاستفادة حتى تمسك بكتاب الله وعلى سنة رسول الله ودعاء الهدى ذرات خير مرضاته وقربه والثواب لله تعالى اللهم ها هنا بين يديك ودعفنا لا يخفى عليك فتعملنا لطفك جودك برحمتك رحم الراحمين اصلح امور الله ظاهرها باطنها في انك على كل شيء قدير وعلى سؤالنا جدير سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, Allah Azza wa Jal has left us with the Urwat al-Wuthqa, meaning that Allah Azza wa Jal has left us with a connection to Allah Jalla wa Ala. It can never be severed. In fact, the person who is from the Ahl Qabair, a person who performs enormities in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that link to Allah's rahmah maintains and remains. Such that the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, when he said, "Ashifa'ati itabar ummati," my intercession is for those who perpetuate and perform the enormities of my ummah, enormous qabair, the great sins, the tremendous sins of the ummah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what we have, ya ikhwan, we have in the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam a means to Allah's rahmah, the bab, the miftahu bab al-rahmatillah, the key to the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. Such Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, إِذَا ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوا اللَّهَ اسْتَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ الرَّسُولُ لَوَجَدَ اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. If they would have performed sins, and then they came to you, and then they sought Allah's forgiveness, and they sought Allah's forgiveness through you, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you indeed found Allah forgiving and merciful. And by this we understand the maqam al-mahmud, the tremendous station Allah has given the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. And the companions of radiallahu ta'ala anhum understood this, such that when anybody dared to take from the honor of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first people to respond to them were the companions themselves. And we learn this from the abiyat, or the poetry which the companions used to recite in response to the kuffar, when they used to take from the honor of the Rasul, insult the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Such that Hassan ibn Thabit, before Abu Sufyan embraced Islam, he said something about the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and hamiyya, or anger or zeal, took the companions, and they responded to Abu Sufyan before he became Muslim. And he said, "Sa'ala ablagu Aba Sufyan anni مغلغلة فقد برح الخفاء بأن سيوفنا تركتك عبدا وعبد الدار سادته الإماء حجوت محمدا فأجبت عنه وعند الله في ذلك جزاء." What did he say? He said in response to Abu Sufyan, he says, "Is somebody going to reach this news to Abu Sufyan? Take this news to him." And then he said, "Have you forgotten something that we know about you which you don't even know about yourself?" And then he continues. He says, بَأَنَّ سُيُوفُنَا تَرَكَتْكَ عَبْدًا. Our swords, our predecessors, our people that fought your family and your qabila generations ago, we left you as a slave. We left you as a slave. And he mentioned his tribe, Abdul Dar. If you go back 4 generations, you will find that there is a link that they have, that the mother of that Qabila is a bondswoman, a slave woman. So he went back 4 generations to defend the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he said, Hajawta Muhammadan fa'ajabtu anhu. You dare to attack the Rasul, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fa'ajabtu anhu. I have responded to him. And he says, what do you say after this? وَإِنَّ اللَّهِ فِي ذَلِكَ جَزَاءٌ. And with this, I am going to get reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that the companion radiallahu anhu would any moment, they would understand the maqam of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Such that Hassan al-Thabit, when he also said, دَمَّ الْإِلَهُ إِسْمُهُ لَا إِسْمِهِ. He said, Allah has connected His name to the Rasul's name. إِذَا قَالَ فِي الْخَمْسِ مُؤَذِّنُ أَشْهِدُ. When the mu'adhin says 5 times a day, he says, Ashhidu. I bear testimony. I bear testimony to what? To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and the Rasul the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَشَقَّ لَهُ إِسْمِهِ إِسْمِهِ إِذَا الْمَحْمُودُ هَذَا مُحَمَّدُ. When he says Allah has extracted his name, the Prophet's name, from Allah's own name. Allah is Mahmud, and Hada Muhammad. So Allah has given a maqam to Rasul alayhi salatu was salam. That we need to understand what his maqam is. And we live in a time now when we say that the people of the past, the Salaf al-Salih, the first 3 generations and the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, did not meet together to remember the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is actually untrue. In the hadith narrated from Nasa'i and others, the companions gathered together and the Rasul entered into the masjid. Imam Nasa'i relates this in sound hadith. The Rasul entered into the masjid. He sits with them and he says, what has gathered you? And they said, we have remembered the fadl of Allah upon His ummah by the coming of yourself. As the companion said, لَوْلَاكَ مَا صَلَّيْنَا وَمَا اِحْتَدَيْنَا. If it wasn't for you, we would not have prayed, we would not have been guided to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we live in a time now where people think to gather together to remember the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam has become an innovation. When in fact the ulama have not said this. The ulama have said something completely opposite to this. In fact, Shaykh Abdul Salih al-Munajjah, he has a text in which he gathers together what the aimmat or the scholars or the imams of our ummah have said. He said, بين المخطوطات والمطبوع وجدت أكثر 150. I've found more than 150 books between the manuscripts and the printed of Mawlid, things that we call the Mawlid. And we should not be scared of this word. We should not have an aversion to this word. We shouldn't have a violent reaction to this word. All it means is there's a gathering. Use conference if you want. Use majlis if you want. Use majma' if you want. Use seerah dars if you want. The musammiyat, the words are irrelevant. The haqaiq, the reality of what takes place in these gatherings is what is important. And somebody may say to you, and to make this sound like a dars, inshallah ta'ala, because people don't sit for lessons, we're forced now to say these things in the khutbah, when in reality we should say this in the lessons. The ulama have come to an agreement, and I narrate to you, I read to you what the words of the scholars have said. These are not my own words. These are not the words of what any person has said except the aimmat al-jahabith ulama, the great scholars, great tremendous imams of this deen. This is what they say. They say, when people say to you, the first 3 generations didn't do it. The people before didn't do it. The Sahaba didn't do it, they say to you. When I've said to you, the Sahaba didn't actually do it. So what do you respond to this? I say the word to you of what the Imams have said verbatim, quoting them exactly so you know what they have said. And I'll tell you from the most strictest of the ulama of this school, from the Hanabila, the scholars of the Hanbali madhab, when they said, Shaykh al-Maqdisi al-Hanbali fi sharh al-Qabir فترك النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عليه والصلاة والسلام لا يدل على الكراهة. قال الإمام بحوثي في الحنبلي في الكشف القناعة ترك النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يدل على الكراهة. قال الإمام الشوكاني في فتح الرباني لم يقل أحد من أهل الإسلام أن ما لم يفعله الصحابة ورسول صلى الله عليه وسلم حرام. Those in Arabic know what I just said. Those who don't, This is a verbatim translation. He says, Imam al-Maqdisi from the Hanabila ulama, he said that just because the Rasul left something to do something, or the companions left to do an action, that doesn't make it haram. That doesn't make it haram. How do you know what the ruling is? You look at the action itself. ماذا يفعل في داخل هذا مجلس? What do people do in the majlis? For example, alhamdulillah, we have Bukhari Khatam in the city. Alhamdulillah, wal fadl of Allah Azza wa Jal. What takes place in Bukhari Khatam? We read the hadith of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We read Quran. We do life of the Imam Bukhari. We do Khatam of Imam Bukhari, the last hadith of Rasul of the hadith of Rasul Sallallahu from the Sahih Imam Bukhari. And we get together, we inshallah give some diyafa, some food for people to take some ajr. Every one of these actions in itself, is it permissible? Gathering to read the Rasul is permissible, is rewarding. Read inshallah the praise of the Rasul is permissible. Read Quran is rewarding. To feed people for Allah's sake is rewarding. To come together in the house of Allah, make dua together is rewarding. Those two all things come together, the whole action becomes rewarding. And this is how we understand actions which have not been done by the Sahaba, not been done by Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. Somebody may say that, why are we mentioning this? Because everything that started in our deen, which has a connection to the asal, the origin of our deen, is mahmud and ma'jur alayh, is praiseworthy and is rewarded. So we have, alhamdulillah, people go for 3 days in Allah's way. Alhamdulillah, ajr for them in this. People go, alhamdulillah, they print things which haven't been printed before. There's ajr in this. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu came with the idea of compiling the Quran in a book that we have today. There's ajr in this. All of this we find that every action that's done in which has a basis of the deen is ajr in this. There were no madaris at the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's no diyar al-ulum. There's no ma'had. There's no institutes. But what did the people do afterwards? They established these. So the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be taught. So the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can continue. So the teaching of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can continue. And by this, what happens? We keep our deen. صالح لكل مكان ولكل زمان. By this, what occurs? We keep our faith totally refreshed and suitable for every time and every place. And this is what the companions understood, radiallahu ta'ala anhum. And this is why the scholars that we just quoted to you have mentioned this. And we are soon going to come across a festivity of the kuffar, a festivity which I've spoken many a time before, so you don't need to repeat it. And that is a festivity of when the demonic symbols and images start to arise. And you have to understand that our deen, our faith, our Islam has also munasabat, has also days that we remember, we think about, we ponder, we read, we refresh about our deen. Such as what? The Risal of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in this month, or Rabi al-Awwal, has come to an end now. Or for what? The 27th of Rajab, when we remember Al-Isra al-Mi'raj. Like what? When we have Nisfa Sha'ban. Or like what? Sittat Shawwal, the 6th of Shawwal. Or like what? Like the Ashra Al-Awwal from Dhul Hijjah. Like what? Like Ramadan. Like what? Famous dates in our tariq that we understand, the 17th of Ramadan, Battle of Badr. We start to understand, we start to think, and we start to understand the sacrifice which the previous generation gave. You have this munasabat. And then you have the munasabat of the kuffar. If we don't remember our munasabat, our dates, our famous individuals, our deen, famous dates within our deen, and nobody's saying there's fadl in those dates of themselves, but you don't remember those, The kuffar will come and replace them with something else. So today we have speech going on amongst the Muslims now. Pumpkins are being ordered and being carved, not realizing the jack-o'-lantern. It's mentioned many times, if we don't need to repeat this. What are the demonic and any occult behind the jack-o'-lantern and so forth? We have Rasulullah, and they have kufr. So every time we forget the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam and the munasabat with this, we start to move away from our deen. And this is why the ulama, when they mention these things, they, like I mentioned, author more than 150 books and poetry and praise the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This is collected, and to this day we read this. We read this. And iyakum, that you take your deen from other than ulama. And all warning be upon you that you take your faith from other than the scholars. SubhanAllah, recently somebody sent something to the faqir about saying that the companions of the early generation didn't mark this particular month. And the response is what I've mentioned to you before, the ulama have mentioned. And the response of it is what? The companions wouldn't be able to sleep until they saw the face of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The companions were such that some of them drank the urine of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The companions were such that they used to be saying, Ummi wa abi ya Rasulullah, my mother and my father, O Rasulullah. And the Rasul used to give a condition for Iman. The Rasul used to give a condition for Iman. When he used to say, La yu'minu ahadakum hatta akuna ahabbu ilayhi min walidihi wa waladihi wa nasi ajma'in. None of you truly believes until what? I am more beloved to him than his father, than his children, than any other person from mankind. Do we have that understanding of the companions? If you do, then don't come to the majalis. Don't come. But alhamdulillah, hasil al-mahsul, you've already achieved what is trying to be achieved. You have achieved what is trying to be achieved, don't come. If you are not at that level, where you sacrifice your father, your child, and all other mankind for the sake of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we need to work on this together. And the faqir is in much need as everybody else. And we are in much need as everybody else to come together and remember this to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If a person doesn't want to come, khair inshallah. It's not farad. Nobody said it's farad. What is wajib is to increase the mahabbah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you can't do this alone, come together, jama'ah. Yadullahi fawqa jama'ah. The hand of Allah is with the group. The same thing when we come together for any type of ibadah we do together, it's stronger together. Salah done together is stronger. Ibadah done together is stronger. Quran that we study together or we do tajweed together is stronger than doing it by ourselves. So inshallah, what we should do is we should come together. And for this reason, like we just mentioned, inshallah we have a gathering in which we'll come together. Read some poetry in the praise of the Rasul. Why? Because companions read poetry in the praise of the Rasul. We'll come together. We'll learn something about the seerah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Unless we think we know the seerah. You know, the ulama, like Imam Qastalani, the commentator of Sahih Bukhari, al-Mawahib laduniyya. Al-Mawahib al-Laduniyya. What does that mean? The gifts, the divine gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon His ummah in the life of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We'll come together, we'll learn about the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. The general dates everybody knows. The date of the birth, date of how the Rasul passed to the next realm, the battle of Badr, Hijrah, all of these things we don't know. We learn about the Rasul, alhamdulillah. But there's details to this. There's examples within this. There's fiqh of sunnah, there's fiqh of seerah, there's fiqh of the understanding of the seerah of Rasul within this. And that's what we'll learn, inshallah ta'ala. So Allah Azza wa Jal enabled us to understand that ulama, Imam Hafiz al-Hijr, Imam Qastalani, Abu Shama, the Shaykh of Imam Nawawi, Imam Nawawi, Ibn Kathir, Imam Jazari, and also Imam Suyuti. And the list will carry on and on and on. These are scholars who have written more than 150. We have compiled of the names of those people who used to gather and remember the Rasul, especially in this month, but every month and every Thursday evening. And this is why if you go to the Muslim lands, whether you go to Misr, whether you go to Maghrib, whether you go to Jazair, or whether you go to Sham, whether you go to Jordan, whether you go to Istanbul or Turkey,